Let me pull up the chat here. Okay. Greetings and salutations, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to my channel. I'm your host, cryptidmasterkd, and I am the shaman of shamans, the great shaman who is here to tell you cryptid stories and bring fact and folklore into one. Now, before we get into today's story, I would just like to ask you all, if you're interested in the channel and you like what you see in the content, please, 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 if you all like this channel and you want to see more of my content, if you're into the weird, the mysterious, the fascinating, the world of cryptids, if you're into that stuff, leave it in the chat, or pretty much just say so in the comments. Anyway, now, to start off our stories and everything else that I'm about to tell you, everyone, let me tell you the story and the differences between a dog man and a werewolf. In these stories, I will be recounting true folklore and tales of the creepy creature known as a werewolf. But you're gonna ask me, people, where did the story of the werewolf get started? If many of you are gonna say, like, you're all gonna say to me, well, werewolves are just the stuff of movies. Werewolves are pretty much creatures of mystery and myth. This is a pretty much interesting story. Well, uh, uh, okay, we got our first contender here, people. We got our first contender. And I know who it is. It's Cryptid Mom. So, without further ado, let's get into some cryptid history. The legend of werewolves goes back centuries, millennia, in fact, all the way back to ancient Greece. And it goes back to a time in Greece, to a cruel king. Now, this is where an interesting plot twist goes on in, you know, this the word, the werewolf word, lycanthrope. Lycanthrope, the word lycanthrope comes from the phrase of a cruel king called Lycan or Lycan. He tested the wrath of the god Zeus by inviting him to a dinner party at his palace. And he was pretty much sort of aware that it was Zeus he was inviting. And by all accounts, the main dish he served to the god Zeus was human, the flesh of his own son. Human flesh. And Zeus, according to the legends, Zeus was terribly enraged at this behavior. And in his rage, he turned Lycan into a werewolf. And it was said, and he didn't just turn Lycan into a werewolf, he transformed his sons into werewolves. And, well, pretty much after that, it is said that he and his descendants roamed the countryside since then. Also, it should be mentioned here that according to the legend, Zeus, enraged that it was his own son that was killed and served on the feasting table, he pretty much said, it said that he was that the boy was brought back to life and became king. But by all other accounts, people, It is said after he was turned into a werewolf, Lycan and his sons stalked the forest. And it said that they hunted, that their howls and screams could be heard in the night as they hunted their human victims. A terrible sound indeed. It's truly horrifying. Many people say that since then that lycanthropes have roamed the countryside of Europe and other continents. Now, oh god. Hi Dee, welcome to the channel. Leave a like if you like my content. Please welcome. I hope you enjoy stories of werewolves, because I'm gonna give you... Yes, thank you. It's exciting to see me live too. Now, I pretty much have covered now the origins of the werewolf. But now, we need to discuss, before we start the stories here, people, we need to discuss why is it that it was not just in Greece where this happened. Throughout Europe and throughout Scotland and even in the Americas, especially in the bayous of Louisiana and other places, you hear stories of werewolves. Now, the particular story I'm going to share with you first. The particular story, people, I'm going to share with you first is the story of a bloodthirsty beast. The beast from a particular location. The beast, a werewolf-like creature, bloodthirsty, and has had a story report of it killing an entire family and attacking some teens. The location, the land between the lakes. Now, many of you may have heard of the land between the lakes, but where exactly is it located? It's located in between the Labaki Lake and the Kentucky Lake. In the 60s, President Kennedy declared it a national forest, a protected place. And I mean that with all authority. It was a protected forest. But people who have gone there reported being stalked or attacked by a mysterious wolf-like creature hiding in the forest or stalking their campground. Now, this may seem like a recent story like Dogman, but no. This story dates back to the Shawnee tribe, way back as the white man first started to come in this area. The Native Americans of the Shawnee tribe, they wanted to keep peace with the settlers and the trappers. So they told them stories about. Now, this is going to sound what obvious it might be. They told stories of a shaman that would roam the land healing, but in time he began to abuse his power, and through that his power became that he had the ability to transform himself into a beast, a wolf beast. And it's said that he was cursed by the local tribe, and that he was banished to the forest in the land between the lakes, a place the tribe would never go. Now, it is also said that he became a spirit being. He became either someone murdered him or he just died of natural causes, but that from this he became a spirit being, a being that was half man and half wolf. And here's where the interesting part goes. The settlers, pretty much ignoring the warnings of the natives, of the Shawnee people, they began going deeper and deeper into the territory of the land between the lakes. They began, looking to trap and hunt so they could sell furs and meat. Maybe find some gold, who knows? But it is said that when they were out there at night, they came back with stories of them seeing these weird shadows in the trees, glowing red eyes, and pretty much in these terrible howls and screams in the night. And many of them after that didn't dare go near the place. Now, not too long after that, back in the 1970s, is when the first ever report of the beast was documented, or it pretty much became known as local folklore. But here's what the people say about it. In 1973, a group of teens brought a camper into the forest. They brought a camper and everything they would need to the land between the lakes. And it is said since then that, well, what happened next was a truly harmful event. During their time there, when they got there, they went out in the woods to try and find firewood. Now, they wanted to find firewood, and so they that night they made a campfire, stayed around the campfire, and told stories of their, and having some drink of cola. How many of you love cola? Leave it in the chat right now. Do you like cola? Anyway, one of the students, one of the teens decided that they excused themselves to go and answer the call of nature. Sweet nature. Anyway, when he came back, he was pretty shooken up and scared. He said while he was doing his business that he heard these loud panting like a dog, only louder, panting and panting sounds coming from a little bit from behind him. So when he returned after that, not too long after he told everyone his story, the teens became scared, and at first they didn't believe him. They were skeptic teens. Maybe he was playing a prank. But then they saw how scared he was. And anyway, after they finished there, they heard the sounds of what they described as loud snapping sounds, like twigs and stuff being snapped and leaves rustling around the camp, like something was circling around them. And according to them, they all of a sudden they began seeing these red eyes looking out from the tree, and that it was off the ground. So it couldn't have been a bear or any other kind of animal, right? So not too long after that, they heard this blood-curdling howl. It was like a wolf's howl, but it was more intense. Like it was pretty much, and it was close. So after they heard this, they gathered into the camper and started driving back to pretty much the RV park. But no sooner had they started the engine than a big upright walking figure slammed into the back of the car of the vehicle. And they said that according to them, they kept hearing scratching and shrieking coming from the back of the vehicle. And pretty much after that, one of them looked in the back rear mirror, the mirror on the side of the car, and they pretty much started driving, but it felt like they were stuck for a minute. And the one who saw it in the mirror said he saw this huge creature holding on to the back of the vehicle with hands. But they managed to get free and get away. This story dates that something. See, after they got away, they had a look at the back of the truck. At the back of the vehicle. Truck, whatever. Yeah, no wonder you would freak out. Anyway, they found these huge claw marks, like all over the back of the vehicle, and they found that the bumper part right here had been torn off. Like something would have to be very strong to pull that off. This incident would only be the spark beginning of the werewolf of the land between the lakes. Now, what you have to understand is the land between the lake monster has some weird traits. Like it's said that some say that it knew how to use technology, that it didn't think like an animal, it thought like a human. Which leads some believe that this creature could be a skinwalker, a shape-shifting witch, like in the legend that I just told you about the medicine man who abused his powers and was banished and cursed to transform into a wolf-like creature and was cast out to the forest in the land between the lakes. That kind of sounds like a skinwalker, right? That sounds like a skinwalker. But me personally, while that is an interesting theory, I'm not sure if any tribes in the area, I could be wrong, but as far as I'm aware, there are no tribes in the area who practice the art of skinwalking. But what this sounds like to me is, keep in mind, this creature was thinking like a human, but it looked like according to them, an upright walking wolf beast. So what I'm predicting here, people, is the beast from the land between the lakes could be an ancient, maybe, we don't know how long these creatures live, but it could be that this thing is a 300-year-old werewolf, a lycanthrope. You know, it could be a lycanthrope. Because werewolves, like many other werewolves can rely on their instincts when hunting, but they use their human intelligence in order to coordinate problems, stuff like that. And this thing knew how to hold on to technology. So it's unclear here, people, and from a lack of evidence, which I think there might have been, but it was covered up, indicates this creature could have been a werewolf. But I want you to tell me in the chat, what do you think it was? Can you tell me, like, it could have been a werewolf? Was it a skinwalker? Now, I'll tell more stories about that in another video. For now, I'm going to share with you, same creature, but I'm going to share with you a case that described the creature of the land between the lakes, the werewolf creature, to be, it's one of the well documented. But this case, here, it doesn't describe. It describes the creature's true reputation, and thirst for blood. I mean, those teens were lucky to get away. But this family that I'm telling you right now, were not so fortunate. They were not fortunate with this situation. It's really sad what happened. Anyway, the story takes place in 1982. In 1982, a family went into the land between the lakes area, and they just in an RV, and they began, and according to the story, all of them, as you know, the women were cooking dinner and the dad went out with his gun to try it out. All of them were brutally massacred. The bodies were found torn apart, partially eaten. And also, it's been recommended here that that one of the eldest girls was found a little bit away from the camper, up in a tree, dead. And in my opinion, that could have been a warning. But for a while now, this story never was documented. Most think it was because it was a cover-up by local authorities, which is completely wrong. I mean, the world needs to know about this stuff to avoid future casualties, right? Anyway, in 2020, a man who identifies himself as Roger, his last name is unknown, but in 2020, he was invited on a YouTube channel to claiming that he was there when this whole thing happened, and he's got the story of what really happened. So sit back, relax, and have some popcorn and cola and maybe some ice cream. You know, sit back and enjoy yourself. Sit back and enjoy as I tell you the horrifying story of his encounter, of his story. In 1982, Roger befriended a family of, I think, 5. And, no, wait, it was 4. Anyway, he befriended this family, and they had moved recently in the area to escape an Amish community, which is okay. Yeah, it's really okay to do that. Anyway, the family, the dad was named Levi, and he one day asked Roger to accompany them to a camping trip in the land between the lakes. And honestly, if they'd just read the stories and heard the stories about the creature, none of it would have happened. Do your research, kids. Do your research. Anyway, he gradually accepted the offer. And he went in, and they went to the spot in the area, not too far from the land between the lakes. And they settled in. The women started making dinner, and the husband, named Levi, decided to go and he decided to go out with his gun and shoot some targets. I don't know if that's legal. I honestly don't know if that's legal. But anyway, he went out with 12 gauge, and while he was looking for targets, he became aware he was, according to the people, he was just heard the children making a ruckus at the front of the RV. And Roger looked out. He looked out of the front window to see what everybody was looking at. And there he saw the youngest son, named Stephen, being lifted up by his throat. He was being lifted up by his throat by this huge wolf-like upright walking creature. This huge wolf-like creature that was gripping him by the neck. Or no, the shirt. It was by the shirt. The details are unclear. But he was lifted up by, like this, by his shirt, by this creature. And out of the bushes, Levi jumped out of the bushes and took his 12 gauge and fired at the beast, hitting it in the shoulder, causing it to drop his son. But the problem was, honestly, this was kind of, if you're in an unknown area in the woods, you need to be prepared for anything, especially this. Anyway, his gun was filled with birdshot shells, which don't do anything to a big predator. And in a quick second, the creature dropped his son and ran at him, bit him, and killed him instantly, ripping him open. And according to the stories that I've heard, Roger, who was terrified, grabbed his 6-gauge shotgun and went out the side door and fired at the beast and hitting it directly. And it wasn't filled with birdshot. It was slug shells. Anyway, the creature pretty much fell to the ground, and I don't know if it was faking or it was dead. But feeling still uneasy and terrified, Roger, who was 15 at this time, he was still just a kid, took this opportunity and hid under the underneath part of the RV, managing to hide underneath it with the gun in his hand. At first, nothing happened, but a couple moments later, the RV began to shake and quake by something very heavy walking inside the RV. What he says he heard was the terrifying screams of the women in the RV. But the screams quickly silenced as they were dispatched quickly. And Roger came to the conclusion, as he heard these things go out of the camper and run back into the forest. Roger says that he came to the conclusion that there were actually 2 of these creatures, of these wolf-like creatures, pretty much in the area that were attacking the camper. So I know it's tragic. It is tragic. It's very tragic indeed. This, but the good news is Roger survived. And when he saw the coast was clear, he came out with it from underneath the RV and ran back from where the RV came up to the main road to get help. No sooner had he done this than a kind man, a kind farmer, pulled off to the side of the road and saw Roger and pulled over and asked him, "Are you okay? Are you hurt?" You know, the usual. And Roger pretty much said, he told them the whole story. He told them everything that had happened. He told them that, you know, it was terrible. He told the entire story. The very story I've told to you now. And to wrap that story up, the farmer drove him to a farm and called the authorities. When they went back to the scene, there were, you know, the National Guard, all the main police officers and other authorities were all gathered there. They were all gathered there surveying the area. And Roger had a good look at the bodies. Roger said that he saw that according to him, there was no document of that the daughter was not launched in a tree. The daughter was found alongside the other women in the RV, completely dismantled. And in fact, now, hey, Mustache, welcome. Musically, welcome to the chat. Anyway, the story goes that after Roger had the encounter, he said that not too long after, he pretty much kept quiet from his family about this and pretty much watched the news, waiting to hear of the story, how the story would play out. It never did. This led him to believe that it must have been a cover-up by the authorities, which is typical, very typical. They say they're doing it to avoid mass panic and all that, but they're just trying to conceal the truth. Anyway, now I don't know anybody from the authorities. I mean, maybe they're nice people in real life. Yeah, I'm getting out of the way. But you're not, guys aren't going to guess what I got here. I actually have the recovered body of one of the victims that was sent to me. It was sent to me by, I think, Roger himself. Yeah. Behold, as you can see, this body was, completely torn apart. There's no hand. It's been torn off. The now it's pretty much been decayed because it's been like 50 years since this happened. Has it been since the 70, 50 years? Anyway, the spine and the fracture marks here showing that this individual had been torn in half. The legs completely torn off. And the skull, obviously in a preserved state, but it still has the shirt on it. Now, I bet you're all going to ask me, what exactly was the creature of the land between the lakes? Could it have been a werewolf or a skinwalker? I already covered that. But anyway, the problem with this story is there were either it was covered up or not. There's no real evidence. There's no real evidence to pretty much tell that this creature actually existed. Well, there is one thing that I need to point out here, people. We need to pause for a minute. And I need to point this out to you guys. Massacres like this have been rooted a lot in werewolf folklore and in history books. And this has not been the only thing like this to happen. I mean, back in this whole thing has happened before. You see, in the 1700s, from 1764 to 1767, an unknown entity in Europe, in the Gévaudan region, France, an unknown entity, what people described as a giant wolf-like creature. They say it could walk on two legs. Yeah, during a 5-year period. It could walk on two legs. It had human-like hands and a terrible taste for human blood. Most like this case with the Land Between the Lakes creature. The bodies were found torn apart, mutilated. They were found, pretty much decapitated. Their heads bitten off. Their bodies partially eaten. And they said that the beast had pretty much an appetite for women and children. And pretty much, after that, here's where the beast of Gévaudan and the beast from the Land Between the Lakes draw both lines in the werewolf folklore. They both said to walk on two legs. The eyewitnesses say that they just had a taste for blood, and they had these abilities to rip people apart. Now, normally I would say that this would sound like a dog man, right? I got a story about that in a minute. But this would sound like a dog man. But when you, the thing is, dogmen, as far as I'm aware, don't shapeshift, and they pretty much, as far as I'm aware, they do have been reputations to stock homes, but they have another sort of supernatural ability to them, all their own, and they don't shapeshift at all. And there have been reports of animals being eaten, but never a human. I mean, as far as we know. I mean, come on, this could be a missing persons case, but the killings in the Gervadon and Land Between the Lakes massacres, most of the kills were humans. And pretty much those who saw the beast, they kind of describe basically the same creature. And that's why in both lands, back to the settlers who went to the Land Between the Lakes and the people of Gervadon, they gave the creature a name. Not the beast, but a name that I'm sure you all are familiar with. The Lugaru. Or Lugaru. Now, this sounds kind of like the Cajun word for the Rougarou. And basically it's the same thing, sort of. Loop means wolf. And Garu means to shapeshift. And according to legend, it's someone cursed to become a wolf-like creature. But that's mostly in the Cajun beliefs. And these stories say pretty much that these two creatures can shapeshift. That's what Garu means, shapeshift. And in Land Between the Lakes with the settlers, the Louisiana Bayou, and in the Gervadon area, these three entities have the exact name, the same exact name. Loup-garou. And it said the loup-garou has a taste for human blood. But why is this all sounding like the same thing? What's going on here? Why are we hearing the same thing over and over? It's the same creature. So basically, what are we dealing with? I'm theorizing they're all the same. They're all the same creature. And when you look at all kinds of cultures around the world, you hear stories about these dog-like humanoids. Back to ancient Greece, to the Egyptians. And the Egyptians had a particular god of the underworld that they worshipped. He was called Anubis, the god of the underworld, who would escort the dead to their afterlife. And according to history books, Anubis was a human with a jackal head. So the story of these wolf creatures is very old and has always been a part of our folklore. And so when people say there's no real evidence of these cases ever being, real, look at our history. That's the solution here, people. Look at our history. And I gotta tell you, I love history. I think I research all kind of historical stuff, mainly battles and, medieval battles and fights. But I also research cryptids from ancient, from ancient history. And the case with werewolves is it goes back centuries. Now, with that all the way, people, by the way, if you're enjoying my content, leave a like, okay? Leave a like. It gives me love. Now, enough with the werewolves. Let's talk about Dogman. I already told you the disqualified supernatural abilities that the Dogman progressed. But here's something that puts a more sinister term on the Dogman. Back in the I think, 30s or I think in the 1980s, there was an officer man who was a night guard at, I think, an asylum right next to a Native American burial ground. Now, that's a messed up place to put a building, people. Very messed up. You gotta respect those places and all their contents. It's better to leave them alone. Anyway, the security guard, who we'll call Bob, because we don't know his real name, so we'll just call him Bob. Bob went out to do his nightly rounds around the building. And as he was walking around, he noticed something near the Native American burial ground. And he put his light. This is one of the most famous statements of Dogman. He looked over at this thing, and it was digging in the dirt, in the burial ground, which it had some nerve. It was digging in the burial ground looking for something, maybe an artifact. And anyway, the creature he described as huge with a dog-like head and a big body. Now, when the creature noticed him, he said it spun its head around and looked at him, got up on two legs, and ran away. And the next night, while he was doing his night shift again, he crossed the burial ground, and the creature was there again. It was there pretty much. It said that it was digging for something again, and he got a little close to get a good look at it, shined his light on it stupidly. I mean, that gives you away instantly. But anyway, he shined his light, and then the creature looked at him, got up on two legs, and turned towards him. And this part will scare you to the bone. When it got a little closer, and a little closer and looked right at him and opened his mouth, and it was starting to utter something. At first, it was like a normal growl, but it turned into words. It started speaking to him. It said, now this was his best translation, Gadara. It said Gadara, which is, if you research the Bible, you can, in the New Testament, it said that there is a place that was in a certain part on the sea there where a man who was possessed by demons resided. He resided there, and Jesus delivered him from the evil by casting, but he was called a Gadaran. And that's what the creature said, too. And pretty much what it said in that inventory was Jesus managed to exorcise the demons from this man, casting them into pigs who drowned in the sea. Anyway, to put it all simply, the dog man said Gadara, which indicates this could be a demonic entity. It could be something paranormal. One theory that came from a writer named Linda Godfrey, you probably heard of her, but she stated and thought that in these burial grounds, that where shamans would commune with the spirit world, there are, in words, portals, doorways to the other side. And she theorized that maybe these dog creatures, most of these effigy mounds are located near Bray Road, which is another topic for another time, because that's where another werewolf-like creature is said to reside. But she thinks that the reason we don't find any bodies or anything is because these beings aren't physical beings. They cross in and out of the spirit world, in and out, or other dimensions. And pretty much, well, they often say that what's interesting about this is, well, several things don't make sense about this. Eyewitnesses have seen this thing eating, drinking, hunting. Now, if it eats and it drinks, it's not a spirit being, unless it's a Wendigo, but it can't be a Wendigo. Wendigos aren't like this. Completely different topic. But according to the people who have seen Dogman, here's something interesting. Some people say that when they look in the creature's eyes, they feel like it's giving them a message, telepathically, speaking with its mind. Like, often it'll tell them that, oh, you puny little human, I can do whatever I want to you. You can't stop me. Someone's at the door. Ugh. This is awkward. Give me a minute here. This is embarrassing. I swear. I'm in the middle of something.
Okay. Are you still on?
Yes.
No, Kyle, get off.
I apologize. Cryptid Mom is in a daze. Anyway, before I wrap this up, this last story is a story. Like I said, these creatures somehow communicate with us, sometimes saying that if you tell anybody where am or that you saw me, I can find you. I'm gonna find you. And I'm gonna get you. So this last story is a pretty much indication of this creature able to speak. Now, the year that this happened is unknown, and the name of the eyewitness is unknown. The person in question pretty much states that she was a young woman, and she had recently broken up with her boyfriend. And to get away from the grief, she went for a walk in the forest and did some running, the usual thing. And according to her, when she was out there, her hat blew off, which is funny. But she ran after it, and it ran somewhere in the woods. And as she got near to get it, all of a sudden, this huge dog thing popped out of the trees and came running up to her, almost like a puppy when it's playing. Like, it didn't seem like it was aggressive, it just looked like it was playing, and it had her hat in its mouth. And pretty much it shook the hat like that. And pretty much ruined the hat. And she was very upset. That was a good hat. It ruined her hat. And it was standing on two legs at first, but then it got down on all fours. It had wide amber glowing colored eyes. And it locked eyes with her. And she said she felt there was this invisible bond, like somehow how it was looking into her head, like with these tethers. And after that, and she just couldn't get her eyes off it. And she said, uh, that after that, it spoke to her. It spoke to her in English. It said, throw something else. And the girl, you can imagine, was terrified. And she started to back up slowly. And that's when he got kind of upset and angry and came towards her a little more and said, throw something else now. And in a heartbeat, she turned around and ran back to the way she came. But she was deep in the woods, so she had quite a ways to run. So she ran and ran, and as she did, she said she could hear upset howling and roaring from behind her. And it sounded upset, very upset. And she said she could hear it running, getting closer and closer and running up behind her. Finally, she was able to get to the freeway, to the road. And as if her luck couldn't get any better, a friend driving her car came up. And she got in the car and pretty much sped off. And they didn't see the dogmen again. They never saw the dogman again. It seemed like when she got to the road, it stopped pursuing her. Anyway, and that's the end of the story. A talking dog man. So not only are these things pretty much these huge scary monsters with incredible intelligence and all that, but they can speak. They just don't often. They can speak to us. So you wonder why, like, this could be a skinwalker or whatever, but anyway, the official verdict, in my opinion, is these creatures are obviously a very old race and have been documented throughout history, even by the legendary Marco Polo. Marco Polo told a story on his adventures of him finding a tribe of dog-headed humans covered in fur, and that they spoke. It spoke to them and all that, but what we're dealing with here is a unique new breed. I believe this is not just a creature of legend, but this is an offshoot, meaning they have been. Yeah, it's a new mask. I got it for my birthday. Anyway, I believe these creatures have been around for thousands of years, but have not been taken seriously. These creatures are a big part of our history. And they will continue being our history for decades to come. And the story is that what we're dealing with in these woods is a new offshoot species. And obviously one that has no fear of man at all. So, how long have I... Here's a question. How long have I been on here? I need to work on 10-minute videos. I really do. I get caught up in the moment, people. I get caught up in the moment and lose track of time. Now, to those of you who are new in the chat, I'd like you to leave a like. Leave a like right now. It's free. Because you know you want to. You know you want to. There's a little button at the top of the screen. Just hit it and hit like. You guys know you want to. Anyway, with that all, I hope you guys enjoyed these stories. Did you guys enjoy these stories? Because it took a hell of a long time for me to make them. But anyway, tune in next time, tomorrow maybe, when I tell you the story of a family in let me think for a minute. Was it, I don't know, where was it? Palmyra. In my next video, I will talk about a family from Palmyra who were held hostage in their own home by a pack of 5 dogman-like creatures. And I hope you enjoy it too. Yeah, thank you for the like. Anyway, I'm going to wrap up this video because I've been on here for 2.5 hours, I think. What time is it? Can someone in the chat tell me what time it is? It's 9:44. My God, I've been on here for 2 hours. Anyway, with that all out of the way, people, I hope you'd enjoyed this stream. And I'd like you all to comment below. I'm opening the comments, so you can leave it at the underneath the stream. You just go to live and you see my video and you can leave a comment. Anyway, like, favorite, and subscribe and all that good stuff. I love you all. Anyway, I gotta go. And I also, thanks for the birthday present, one of my fans. This is what we talked about today. This, people, is what I talked about. Now you know. So, with that out of the way, I hope you enjoyed. Like, comment, and subscribe, and all that good stuff. I love you all. Peace out. See you in my next video.